In case any of you are wondering what I'm doing up here, I assure you, you're not alone. I thought for a minute when I was asked to do it that I could maybe put the bite on the chairman for a grant, but they figured that wouldn't be cool. I thought then perhaps this was, I was invited to do this because I've been around for so long. I spent 20 years with my students, the University of Montana Jubileers, entertaining in this venue. And if Mark Martin has done his job well, there is someone more or less inebriated at the bar who, right in the middle of the chairman's speech, will shout, "I want to hear Temptation!" Right? I must keep my remarks very brief. That's for instructions from my wife, Joanne, who was Executive Secretary for the Montana Arts Council from the year one. Actually, please don't encourage her. It's fine. She'll take over the mic. But maybe they invited me because of nostalgia, you know, because, as I say, I've been around for so long. We came here in 57. What? No, that's 1957, not 1857. Some years before, there was an arts council. And, one of the things that I set out to do as a member of the music faculty early on, in the late 50s, was to set up an arts tour to New York City, because I thought it would be refreshing for Missoulians to take an annual trip to New York. That's because there was no place to go in the West. There were so few enrichments available in the West. Well, I needed 13 people to make that first tour go, and only 3 people in Missoula knew what the hell I was talking about. And now, here we are. And it is a pleasure to take part in this evening, acknowledging the presence of the Executive Director of the National Endowment for the Arts. I have some announcements to make. First of all, the speech tonight will be taped by the Missoula Community Access Television crew as part of its media assistance program to nonprofits. Secondly, let me see. All right. And now I would like to introduce Corky Claremont of the Salish Kootenai tribes, director of the art department at Kootenai Salish College, who will introduce the proper opening to this evening's observance.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure to be here this evening, especially to welcome Bill to our area. Everybody's seated here in the area that our people used to be thousands of years ago, and they still come and visit here, by the way. Someday we'll reclaim it. Not asking the fact of the specific. No, but I welcome you, and to get us started in a good way this evening, I'd like to ask Victor Charlo to come up and give us a prayer. Victor Charlo is the recognized chief of our Salish people and lineal descendants. He's also a poet, playwright, and I think many of you have maybe had a chance to hear his poems, and maybe even seen some of his plays. He's a tremendous talent in our community and a terrific leader. Okay.
Thank you, Corky. I want to thank the organizers for inviting me. It's always an honor. I would like to ask the television crew to turn their cameras off. Wouldn't want any pictures to be taken. Of course, this is a sacred part of any self.
Thank you, Rick. I'd like to introduce a former student, a senior student in college, Juan Perez. Juan is one of our more distinguished students. He right now is vice chair of the NIEA, National Indian Education Association, and he's also had numerous other key positions in our AHEC college organization. He's a student Senate president, and he's done some great things for us at the college, and it was hard to let him go, so we decided to hire him at college, and now he's a full-time employee at the college. But Juan is going to do an honor song tonight to honor our guest. Juan doesn't need a mic. Please stand. I have one other thing I'd like to do here. We'd like to honor Bill Ivey with some gifts from our people. Bill. This is a videotape called The Place of the Flowing Waters, and it was produced by Roy Bigcrane and Tom Smith, and it talks about our tribe and the Kerr Dam. Thank you. It has a lot of our culture there. And I'd also like to present a pair of gloves. Like a gift wrap. These gloves are very special. They were made by Ushni Kenyo. He's an elder of our tribe. She also teaches at our Salish Community College and is teaching high can in this quarter. She'll be celebrating her 85th birthday this March. Again, I appreciate the opportunity to share some of our culture with you, and we hope that when you put your hands in these gloves, you'll think of our grandmother, our old one, the keeper of our wisdom, and wish you best in the future.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Corky and Victor Long, thank you so much. I'm honored by the gift and honored by this wonderful connection with your tribal heritage. I will certainly treasure this. And of course, as someone trained in the field of folklore, trained to, I hope, understand and certainly honor and respect the rich diversity of our cultural heritage, it means a great deal to me to take away with me a part of the culture that has been here in this place for thousands of years. So thank you. You honor it. Thank you.
Here we are. Here we are. Black Elk of the Lakota Sioux reminded us that the whole hoop of the world is made of many hoops. And we're grateful to Vic and to Juan Perez and to Corky for linking their hoop with ours this evening and for sharing their land with us. And now we draw another hoop into the whole hoop of our world. Mai Vang Lee is going to sing a traditional song of greeting for Chairman Ivey. Mai Lee is one of the newest recipients of the Montana Arts Council Folk and Traditional Arts Apprenticeship Award, which is funded by the National Endowment for the Arts. She learned her Hmong style of singing in Laos as a child from her mother, her sister, and her grandmother. And she is gracious enough to share with us tonight her knowledge and skills as she shares them among youth and others in the Missoula community. Mai Ling.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marty, for sharing your history with us. Again and again, we fall into the pattern of justifying the arts as a part of our wealth, our economic wealth. But the true wealth, I think, is in the sharing of the people of the Salish and Kootenai people and the Hmong people in our community. They are our riches. Now I'm pleased to introduce my longtime friend and now Business and Creative Enterprise Associate, Dave Nelson. Dave was, for 20 years, director of the Montana Arts Council. Previously, he was director of the Yellowstone Art Museum, and he is now president of the Missoula Symphony Association. And here to introduce our speaker for this evening is Dave Nelson.
It's a great pleasure to address this evening, and particularly what a special event this really is. I have always been, when you're in polite company, sometimes you adjust your comments based on the politics of the people you're dealing with. There's two things I'll never compromise. One is my great admiration and thanks for what the National Endowment for the Arts has done for this state. It has been quite remarkable. And the other is my belief that the Macintosh operating system is far superior to any other. Well, in the last 4 or 5 years, I must admit that most of those concepts were somewhat in question. And then Steve Jobs took over Apple, went into the area where the artists were, his design team, and found out he had some of the best designers in the world, and he said, hey, I'm going to cut you loose and let you design the most beautiful computer man has ever seen. They did that, and Apple is back. And now I'm happy to say, after seeing the news accounts, that the National Endowment for the Arts broke the glass ceiling and finally broke the $100 million barrier that had been set in place for the last 8 years by the era of what I think Bill probably talks about, angry politics. Now, it doesn't sound like much, but for those of us who have followed the endowment over the years, it is a tremendous breakthrough, and we're really happy to celebrate that this evening. Thank you so much for your kind work. Pat Williams very much wanted to be here to do the introductions, and as you know, Pat's long history of support for the arts nationally has made a tremendous impact in the fact that through his hard work we have an endowment, and one that can now grow. But there is a deeper history too to this state, which I want to share with you, and read you a little excerpt from a little history on Montana. Mary Ewell, in writing the history of the community arts movement in the United States, focused on Montana and philosopher Baker Brownell as perhaps the founder of community development in this country. Working through the University of Montana in 1945, Brownell articulated a concept of the human community as a fertile ground where the arts become the province of people collectively articulating the right to determine how they want to live and what legacy to leave to their children. Brownell attracted the genius of journalist and author Joseph Kinsey Howard, a Montana legend, whose book Montana High, Wide, and Handsome is still cherished. Together they created a prototype for the small-town renaissance that swept this nation. And it really is true that the idea of community development started right here in Missoula, Montana in 1945, and it has grown since then. Another part of the history has to do with the origins of the National Endowment for the Arts. And Laura this morning was trying to explain the Kennedy involvement. It's true if you get your dates, it was Johnson who voted in, but the fact of it is it started with JFK in his inauguration. He was the first president to ever invite a poet, and the poet was Robert Frost. And part of the inauguration ceremonies, he said, "A next august age, a golden age of poetry and power, of which this noonday is the beginning hour." And while we look back at that and we remember it, we don't remember what a great paradigm change that actually occurred in this country. Kennedy had invited to the reception following the inauguration a substantial number of noted artists to be special guests at the event. Moved by the unprecedented involvement of artists, Ellen Tate wrote, "From 1789 to 1961, the arts and letters had not, in the eyes of our government, existed." John Steinbeck exclaimed in the book, in the guest book, said, "What a joy that literacy is no longer prima facie evidence of treason." And it should be noted that it was Jackie Kennedy, if you do look into the history, that wonderful woman has had such effect on this country, and the history of the endowment can be traced back in a great measure to her work. So Montana has shared a lot with the National Endowment for the Arts, and I think we've taken our share in helping to survive and now prosper, and also the great value it has been to us. And one more thing, Mark, I don't know if you knew this when you asked me to do the introduction, but there's 3 reasons why you shouldn't. My first opportunity to meet a chairman of the National Endowment for the Arts was to meet Nancy Hanks. For those of you who know anything about the arts in this country, Nancy Hanks really was a formidable force and quite an elegant lady. And because Mike Mansfield had much to do with supporting the creation of the National Endowment for the Arts, we in Montana had some special access back to the endowment, so I was invited back to have an audience. And indeed, this was a regal lady, and you really did have an audience. So I got all gussied up and went in and all prepared to meet her. Dave Senema came up to me and said, "Dave, how do you tell a man in French that his flies are?" My second opportunity to impress the chairman of the National Endowment for the Arts was at a meeting with Frank Hotzel, who was then chair, and the discussion was education. And Frank had the idea that we would take the majority of the money the National Endowment had and focus it on art education for 1 year and change the future of this country. Well, myself and a friend that Bill Ivey knows, Ellen Lovell, were sitting at a table and we thought, I don't think this is a great idea. It's a massive undertaking, and while we should play an important role, I don't think the endowment can do it alone with this small budget. So Ellen said, well, I think, it would be kind of like being pecked to death by ducks. And so I searched for a better metaphor, and I said, Mr. Chairman, we really support the ideas of changing education. But, it really might be like a march on Russia. I'm trying to come up with, Laurie Anderson, the artist, would say the middle reform is sometimes you try to sound more intelligent than you really are. Well, I really stretched for that metaphor, and of course wanted to impress on him what it meant to take an undertaking like of that size. So within an hour, the chair was addressing the whole group and said, I'm quite disturbed that some of you think our teachers are communists. Somebody later told me Frank did not have a great sense of humor, and he tended to take things quite literally. The third reason that you're at risk for having me introduce the chairman was 10 years ago. I don't know if it's 10 years ago today, but you may or may not know this, but we celebrated in Bozeman the 25th anniversary of the National Endowment for the Arts. It was the only place it was celebrated. And I'll tell you why. Those were very, very dark days. John Kronmeyer was being crucified in the press. And everybody agreed, John, just hide for a month or two. No matter what you say or what you do, it's not going to help. So just lie low. So John did. And so when he came to Montana, it was his first exposure to the press. So Sue Talbot and I went over to pick John up. He was quite nervous. We were nervous. He was preparing for this press conference. And we were to take him to the airport afterwards. So John comes out. Sue opens up the back of her station wagon. John throws in his bag. I'm standing there. I see John move backwards. So I take the hatch and slam it down. Unfortunately, John had gone back in to get his notes. And I cold cocked him. A good friend, about to meet the press, and there he is staggering about, trying to gain his composure. So those are 3 reasons why you're at risk. But let me go on. I really have to admit how impressed I am with Bill and how he has come to this community. And has been absolutely willing to spend an inordinate amount of time meeting the public and talking on occasions that benefit us all. And he's a charming fellow, and we're really happy to have him as the chairman of Endowment. He is a teacher, a writer. Ivey was a senior research fellow at the Institute of Studies in American Music at Brooklyn College. He taught at Vanderbilt University, Blair School of Music. He was born in Detroit in 1944. He was educated at the University of Michigan and Indiana University and holds degrees in history, folklore, and ethnomusicology. He was the director of the Country Music Foundation in Nashville for 27 years, and the first arts administrator to become chairman of the National Endowment for the Arts. Bill, thank you for being here.
I'm going to do a little stage management
That I can do.
because I actually,
No better medium
I actually have a little stack of paper. Lights on. I'm all set. Thanks to all of you. Thanks, David, for that kind and fascinating introduction. I have to say, when you talked about meeting Frank Hotzel having a fly problem, for a moment I did look down. But Nancy Hanks was a grand lady, very elegant, and traveled with quite an entourage. And thinking of her reminded me, whenever I visit with a group like this, there's always a quotation that occurs during the cocktail hour that stands out, and I always try to write it down and then repeat it to everyone. And the quotation of the night comes from Laurel Wyckoff, who said, this is a quote, "The appearance of elitism is death in Montana," which I think is a very which is good advice. So thanks to David. I want to also express my thanks to David Morgenroth for his piano playing during the reception hour, and certainly to the Rocky Mountain Ballet Theater School for the performance, and to Corky and Victor Juan Perez for the prayer and the wonderful gift and their presence, and also to Mai Vang Lee for her performance, and the reminder of what Joe said more eloquently, but the reminder that the real strength of the arts here in Montana and here in the nation is the diversity, the rich diversity of America's cultural heritage. And I congratulate all of you who were honored here tonight for your contributions to the arts here in the great state of Montana. I've been well hosted here. I feel, I said to Barbara Kustra earlier, I feel like I've lived here for 4 or 5 years in the last, traversing the Missoula time and again to different locations to talk at times to the same people in the rain, but in the much needed rain, the very welcome rain. But I must thank Mark Martin for being with me at virtually every step in the car and on foot. He's done a wonderful job. And Jerry Fetz, his president, and Bill Fraser, your chairman and chairman of the Montana Arts Council, and Arlen Fishbaugh, of course, your director, and Michael and Suzette Parfit, who gave me a near plane trip yesterday. We were halted by the weather, but Michael went so far as to file an instrument flight plan and come down here into the Missoula airport, and he was poised to fly me around, even if it had to be in the clouds. But I'm a pilot also, and we had a brief discussion of it and thought better of the flight. But I certainly appreciate his energy and the time I had to spend with him talking about his work and about our mutual love for aviation. And it was great while I was here to get a chance to visit with 2 former members of our National Council on the Arts who reside here in Montana, Wally McCrae and Nina Brock. And they both have made wonderful contributions to our National Endowment for the Arts. It's great to be out of Washington. Pierre L'Enfant, the brilliant designer, laid out a perfectly good, squared-off grid of streets in in Washington, D.C., and then laid a completely careless pattern of avenues on top of it that causes everybody in Washington to drive every so often in circles. I don't know if any of you have experienced it, but it's a wonderful metaphor for the way things often go in that city. And so it's great to get out of the place where we so often go in circles into a place where the highways are straight and also very, very long. And you can, on most days, really see a horizon. I must comment on the print here to my left that may be a bit of a mystery to you, but I have to say a bit about it. That's a print of a painting that resides at the Country Music Hall of Fame in Nashville. And it represents a very important grant made by the National Endowment for the Arts to the Country Music Foundation back in 1973. It was a grant that encouraged great artist Thomas Hart Benton to come out of retirement at the age of 84 and paint one last mural painting. The original painting is 6 feet by 10 feet in size. The idea came from a songwriter named Joe Allison, a Nashville record producer and songwriter. He wrote a very famous song, "Put your sweet lips a little closer to the phone. Let's pretend that we're together all alone." It's a wonderful song, and Joe was the guy who came up with the idea. One of the artists he produced was a singer named Tex Ritter, cowboy star and a fine country singer, and Tex flew out to Kansas City and sat down and drank bourbon with Thomas Hart Benton through half of the night. And after the consumption of plenty of bourbon, Benton agreed with Tex that the thing he had to do at age 84 was take on a commission and paint a work on the sources of country music. It was completed in 1975. Benton said to his wife, Rita, "I think this painting is finished. I'm going to go out to the studio and look at it, and if I think it's right, I'm going to sign it." And this was right after dinner. And about 2 hours later, he hadn't come back in the house. She went out to the studio. He had died. He fell over in front of the painting, sitting there looking at it. It remains unsigned to this day. But it's truly the gift that keeps on giving, which is so typical of so many NEA grants, because that painting, that commission, I talked to Benton on the phone. I said, "What do you charge?" He said, "Well, I charge $600 a square foot." That's what he charged for paintings. And that was about a $55,000 commission, of which the National Endowment for the Arts paid half. That painting today is worth much more than $1 million. It's the largest asset of the Country Music Foundation apart from real estate. It's one of the most important paintings in Nashville, Tennessee. It's the only Benton painting that is accompanied by all of the preliminary sketches and studies that Benton completed, including the clay model that he built in order to judge the three-dimensional effect of his work. And so it's become a grant that was important in 1974 when it was made, and is just as important in the year 2000 as the Country Music Hall of Fame is getting ready to open a brand new $40 million facility in downtown Nashville that will have in that new building a special place designed by the architect just for that painting. So it reminds me of my years in Nashville, and it's appropriate because this is exactly the time when, as David mentioned, the NEA is again beginning to move ahead. We did receive a $7.4 million budget increase. It was in the Interior bill that the President signed Wednesday morning. I was pleased to be with him when he signed that bill. And after 8 years of no budget increase, the NEA is again moving ahead. And Montana is exactly the right place for me to come right after that budget increase was announced to celebrate our accomplishment with all of you. David referred to Pat Williams and his role as a member of Congress in saving the agency. It's very true that Pat, along with just a couple of partners, did, as he put it, lay their bodies down on the railroad tracks in front of a real onslaught, a real train that was coming down at the endowment at full speed, and managed to stop it. And I think that Pat was tapping into a real heartland spirit. And he reminded me yesterday morning when we had coffee that when the endowment needed to be saved, it wasn't New York or Los Angeles or Chicago that stood in the way of that train. It was the heartland. It was the middle part of America. And I think there's a great understanding of the value of art and art making and of cultural heritage and creativity in this part of the country that came into play when Pat Williams was able to help save the agency. So it's appropriate that as we begin to celebrate a new beginning, I come out here to Montana, talk with all of you, and explain what we're going to try to do. We're really coming out after 10 years. We really did win. And it reminds me, the situation that we're in now reminds me of the story that my friend Pierre Cossette, he's a wonderful television producer. I think this might be a little bit too far in front of the speakers. Does that help? Yeah, that helps. You know, you get these microphones out in front of the speakers and they feed back. It's technology. It reminds me of a story that Pierre Cossette, my good friend, he's a television producer, does the Grammy Awards. He produced the Will Rogers Follies on Broadway. He tells a story about, I think this relates to the endowment, a magician who at a certain point in his career decides that he's got a wonderful new act. He goes to his manager and he said, I've got the perfect act. This is going to be absolutely wonderful. I will go on stage and I will call out of the audience the strongest man in that audience. I will give him a sledgehammer and he will hit me in the forehead and I will not be injured in any way. This is absolutely fabulous. His manager said, you're absolutely crazy. There's no way you can do that. It's not going to work and you're going to be killed. I won't let you do it. He said, I insist. I've got it worked out. I know it's going to be perfect. It'll be wonderful. First night, he comes up on stage, looks out over the audience, calls up this burly gentleman, gives him a big sledgehammer. The guy rears back, hits the magician in the forehead. He's driven back against the back of the stage, against the scenery, against the brick wall. He slumps down to the ground, unconscious. He's rushed to the hospital, where he lies in a coma for 8 years. Suddenly, he wakes up, ta-da! And I think there's a way in which the endowment is a little like that magician. We're coming out of a long period in which it's been very tough for us to really know what was going on. We've been under attack, but we can't really be the way he is. We can't just declare victory and go back to the way things were. That's something that can't be there for us. We can't pretend things are the same as they were before the agency came under attack. We have to move forward in a kind of confidence grounded in a couple of things. I think a clear sense of the value of art and art making to society, something I don't think we really had to establish back in the 70s and 80s. I think we have to move forward in the confidence of the value of a strong federal partnership. Not a federal presence, but a true federal partnership. And I believe we can be confident. Whenever I think about being confident, I think of the great Ty Cobb, the wonderful Hall of Fame hitter. When he was an elderly man, he was asked by a young reporter, Mr. Cobb, if you were alive and if you were active in the major leagues today, how well do you think you would hit? What would your batting average be? Ty Cobb thought for a minute. He said, well, I think maybe 220, 225. The reporter said, well, why do you think that is? You think it's that the pitching is better or that the season is longer, so your average wouldn't be quite as high? He said, no, I'm 75 years old. And I think that is really a definition of confidence. So I think in the short time I have, I'd like to talk about the things that can give us that confidence, talk about value. Review a couple of ideas that I think are familiar to you, that some of you are already working in. And maybe toward the end of my remarks, put forward a couple of tentative thoughts of where I think we might be going. We do have an additional $7.4 million, and of course $2.8 million of that amount will be going to the states. It's all part of our Challenge America initiative, which we proposed to the president. He liked. was passed on to Congress. Of course, he was asking for $50 million, but Congress did give us 7.4. They liked the program also. And it's all about access to the arts and about bringing the arts to young citizens. I think many of you who are engaged in the arts here in Montana have been working hard in both of those areas. I think both of those goals assume the value of the arts. That is, there's an assumption that arts are good for communities. And I know you have studied the impact of arts in communities here in Montana. You know that there's a $24+ million annual economic impact. You know that the arts generate 2,500 jobs and that the money that those jobs generates stays right here in the state. I think you all know the way economic development can connect with the arts. That City Spirit grant that the NEA made to the organization that was actually the precursor of the Missoula Cultural Council helped start all of the development along the river, which continues today. We have helped fund cultural plans for communities here in Missoula and in Billings, and of course both of our mayors, Missoula, or no, we have mayors here, and from Billings and Missoula, Mayor Tooley and Mayor Karras. And you participated in our Arts Reach program, which is a special program that's targeted to those states that have received the smallest number of direct grants from the NEA. And an Arts Reach grant helped fund the Montana Festival of the Book, which occurred just a few weeks ago and I think offers a wonderful opportunity for growth in the future. And many of you have worked in cultural tourism, and I think all of you know that much has been achieved in that area for the state of Montana, and there is still much that can be accomplished. And Mayor Karras and I were talking about what might happen around cultural tourism in this city to build on what you have already accomplished. About a week ago, I was up in northern Michigan at the opening of a new performing arts center on a college campus, Michigan Tech University in Houghton, Michigan, way up in what's called the UP, where I grew up. And I said in my remarks at the opening of this Rosé Center, which is going to serve the campus, but also the entire community and the entire Western Upper Peninsula, that the real value of that asset and of that investment will be understood not in 2 months or 3 months, or maybe not even in a year or two, but in 5 or 10 years, when the community understands how the presence of an arts center of that quality can be transforming. I think institutions like the Festival of the Book offer that same opportunity. I suspect many in this room will look back in 4 or 5 years and say, look at what a wonderful asset we have now that started back in 2000. We also talk about arts and their connection with the lives of young people. We know quite a bit about the role of music in early brain development. We know there's a good connection there, a solid, demonstrable connection. There's some evidence, not yet quite so compelling, but it's there, about the relationship between the study of art for young people and overall academic achievement in school. And we know quite a bit about the way in which arts can connect with kids who are having problems in school, those who are having difficulty with authority or difficulty acquiring the skills that are going to help them function effectively in society as good citizens. You know, about 5 years ago, the NEA got involved with the Department of Justice in a partnership with the Office of Juvenile Justice Delinquency Prevention, a program called Youth Arts, which was really a pilot program, relatively modest in its scope, but it was conducted in Portland, Oregon, and San Antonio, Texas, and the suburbs of Atlanta. Zeroed in on kids who were having different types of problems, some in school, some who had actually been in contact with the justice system, but it linked them up with after-school arts programming. And most importantly, the Justice Department paid an independent firm, Caliber and Associates, to come in and see how the kids in arts programming worked out in comparison with those in other kinds of after-school programs. And the arts kids, right across the board, did better. They had better skills at working with their peers. They did better in their communication with authority. They had fewer contacts, fewer new contacts with the juvenile justice system. So clearly, art and art making pull into play skills that are absolutely essential as young people make the transition into being effective, productive adults. So it's very important in relation to our young people that we fight for curriculum-based arts education. And Paul Ritter and I have been talking about the fact that the arts are here in Missoula, here in other cities in Montana, but it seems to be an ongoing fight to continually give them the presence that they deserve. So we have to make sure that curriculum-based arts education taught by professional teachers, sequential training, those things are there in schools. And we also have to get kids face-to-face with artists and art making, because there's nothing like the contact between a young person and a working artist to provide that extra you-can-do-it magic. And I think particularly of Dale Chilhooly, the great glass artist who runs a hot studio, a glass-blowing studio for young people who have been in trouble with the law out in Tacoma, Washington. And there's a young man who literally came into that program running away from a police car. He was literally being chased. He was on foot. The police car was chasing him. He was trying to get away. He ran into a building, and it was Dale Chilhooly's studio. And he stayed, and today is himself a successful glass artist. Now, not every young person can make that kind of transition from fugitive to working artist. But I think that's a great example of the kind of transforming power that's there for us as we connect the arts with young citizens. So Challenge America. It's all about arts in communities. It's all about arts in young people. The emphasis is on underserved areas. Congress wants to do it, and we think at the Endowment that it's the right thing to do, to connect with places that haven't perhaps had the access to the arts that they deserve. We've got a pretty good record here in Montana. You know, we've been able to invest about $1.4 million here in this state over the last 3 years, and I think with the partial funding of the Full Arts Challenge America program, we're going to be able to do more. So we know something about the value of arts and community, and I think we know something about arts and young people, and just about everybody in this room has played some role in either working with young people through the arts or working with arts to build community. And we use this value when we're making arguments on behalf of what we're trying to accomplish, why we think the arts are important. And I think it's something we absolutely have to continue. We have to talk about arts and communities, arts and economic development, arts and young people. But I think we can go further, and I think it's important that we go further. We have to begin to close in on a new, bolder set of arguments that are really connected with the agenda of this century, not the agenda of the one that we have just exited. You know, if you look not at the arts, but at society in general, and at the way our government has connected with society through the 20th century. You know, we had in the early 20th century the social gospel, in the 30s the New Deal, more recently the New Frontier, the Great Society. These were important programs that in different ways, different philosophies, tried to equalize opportunity for our citizens, tried to increase the material well-being of citizens that were most in need. And along the lines of those agendas, equalizing opportunity, elevating material well-being, there still is much to be done. But we have to confess, and I think we can all agree, that much progress has been made. And here at the beginning of the 21st century, there are a number of observers who suggest that the challenges of this century are not going to be along a kind of material divide between those who have wealth or do not have wealth, but perhaps along a kind of spiritual divide, a broadly defined spiritual divide. And what do I mean by that? I'm really talking about extending the quality of life that we would like for all our citizens, a kind of quality of life that was once reserved for the rich, extending that quality of life to all. And you know, when a major architect starts to design dishes for Target, when Martha Stewart is doing, you know, her decorating items and paint and all this for Kmart, when Abercrombie and Fitch starts to sell to everyone with a few dollars the kinds of carefully worn clothes that were once available only to the Bushes and the Kennedys in Maine or Massachusetts during a summer holiday. I think we see that there's a real equalization, a real coming together of the population with things like quality and taste and design, things that might have been impossible even 15 or 20 years ago. And if you think about it more seriously, you talk about extending these spiritual resources. Now, what are the kinds of things that we might think of if we really try to address quality of life and try to address this spiritual divide? What do we want for our citizens? I think we want a lifelong sense of purpose, that life is meaningful. We want to give citizens a vision of opportunity so that they know that if they work, they can progress, they can move forward, that there are opportunities for them. That there's a sense of community, a nurturing community that surrounds them. That they possess the ability to engage diversity, to engage the diversity that really characterizes our democracy. I think we want them to possess an ethic of benevolence so that our great philanthropic tradition continues and grows. They need a work ethic and a personal sense of discipline, and they need the capacity to focus their talents and their energies. An appreciation for quality, so they know what's really of value and what is not. And a personal thirst for knowledge and a sense of self-esteem that in many ways is the result of possessing these other characteristics. Now, many in this room, I would say everybody in this room, possesses just about everything on that list. But we know that many citizens do not. We want these things for everybody in this society. I think especially we want these things for the chronically poor, for the disaffected young, for the bored newly rich, for the disappointed middle-aged, and for the isolated elderly. And society, our society has the capacity. We have the resources to address these challenges of the spiritual divide. And I believe that art and art making and cultural heritage and creativity are at the very center of conveying these capacities to all of our citizens. To me, this is going to be the value of art in this century. You know, putting a kind of keystone into the strong arch of America's democratic, egalitarian dream. And here in Montana, you know, if commitment to art and culture is to be really lasting in this society, I think it's got to grow out of the heartland. It has to start in places like Missoula and Bozeman and Billings. It's got to engage the very best of the multiple artistic traditions and cultural traditions that make up our society. And it has to make sense to everybody, that the values that we feel can't just be our values, but they must be those that appeal to all citizens. Now, NEA came out here to Montana, Pat Williams, when it was under attack. And now I'm out here again, spending a couple of days talking with you and listening to you as we move again ahead. And I can guarantee to you that as we do move ahead, the NEA will be a willing, eager, and effective partner in your search to advance Montana's creativity and cultural heritage. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. I think we're especially moved that the chairman is here at a time when the NEA is experiencing this increase because there are a few states that have fought harder than Montana for the arts. So it's good to know that the good fight pays off, and it'll pay off in Montana eventually too. So the NEA fight is a real inspiration. I'd like to, on behalf of everybody, thank Mark Barton for all of the work that he did to put together this really memorable experience. And at the Arts Council, we put together a little certificate of deepest appreciation to Mark, and I'd like to read it. Certificate of deepest appreciation and gratitude to Mark Martin of the Missoula Cultural Council for his tireless work on behalf of the Missoula cultural community and the state of Montana. It's signed by Bill Frazier, our chairman, who really does send his regrets. He had to be back in Big Timber and couldn't be with us tonight. And I signed this important document, which closes by saying he's certainly old enough to know better. In closing, as a final tribute to the chairman of the endowment, we're so honored to have you here and so grateful for the inroads that you've made in achieving this major accomplishment of additional funding and really turning the tide of the conversation about the National Endowment for the Arts. You know, we've done a lot of road trips talking about funding for the arts in Montana. And it's very interesting in these public state-of-the-arts programs that we've done, which interestingly were written by Barb Kustra. And they're absolutely fabulous. We've done about 100 of them around the state. At the end of each of those, continually, Mapplethorpe and Serrano come up, still. And it's 10 years later. And you know, it's just remarkable. And when you get the facts out about what actually happened, the chief response is, well, no one told us that. You know, but it just goes to show we, you know, still have so much work to do. And so for the tide to be changing and for the tone of the conversation to be changing, it's a real welcome relief for the message that we all want to take out to people in our state. Mr. Chairman, the people that are here tonight are an inspiration. They're among the brightest stars in our sky here in Big Sky Country. People that have driven 9 and 10 hours one way to be here tonight, are leading arts organizations, leading artists of all kinds from around the state. I can tell you we are here at your beck and call to serve you, to serve the NEA. We believe in the NEA. It's been enormously important to our state, so we're really good fighters. You know, we're stubborn. One of, I think, our great strengths and the great strengths of all people in the arts is resilience and tenacity, and we're all that, aside from all of the people who are enormously talented in this room. So we thank you. We invite you back, and as a token of our appreciation, we'd like to leave you with a gift. I remember a woman telling me one time, and I just love this line, Sandy Bellingham down in Bozeman said, you know, Montana's a part of America that still works. And I think Montana is a community, and to be in touch with the pulse of the nation, with the core of the nation, you can always turn to Montana. We know that you value the rural nature of America, and we'd like to leave you with this gift of our Montana anthology of The Last Best Place, signed by Onyx Smith, one of the co-editors, and we just are so appreciative. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You bet. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you all very much. And I very much appreciate your spending time with me, and it was great over the last couple of days and this evening as we had a chance to visit, to learn about your interests, your concerns, and your projects. And as I said, we look forward to growing the NEA and working with you in more and better ways in the future. So thanks for the wonderful hospitality to Mark and all of you, and thanks for this gift. Thanks.
And now, a quick word of appreciation to the Elks Club for their hospitality, and to Chef Tony Eflin, for his wonderful meal. My thanks to you, and my thanks for your very gracious forbearance in this, one of the most difficult performance venues in the state of Montana. It should be clear to all what it is the performance arts community in this vicinity really needs now. Thank you all.